Herbal Talks. I am Miss Green of Herbal Punk. Today we have the great pleasure to talk to our guest, Laura Baum, a holistic lifestyle and business coach with a clinical herbal practice. Today we will be discovering herbs for immunity, energy and hormonal balance, so stay with us. Hello Laura, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you?
I am doing great. You, Miss Green.
Thank you, that's very good to hear. So Laura, I would like to begin by acknowledging and saying that your achievements in herbalism are pretty impressive, and I really like your determination to help other people. And I know you are currently working on very exciting and fascinating projects. Can you tell us about them, please?
Yeah, so thank you so much for that. That's very kind of you. We do a lot. There's a lot of activity. We're a very active community where our company is based, as well as online. We've had an online network for since 2016, and I switched over to coaching because I wanted to make a more interpersonal connection with people on the long term. So instead of just having the clinical consultation model where you see someone for maybe once or twice, instead I see my clients for once a month, 6 months, with lots of content and worksheets and things for them to do in between. So really kind of slower growth model where we were building relationships and really making some deep networks. And then we also have a local chapter of Herbalists Without Borders, which is an international nonprofit to kind of connect people on the grassroots level, just to kind of get them thinking about what's possible with herbs.
Brilliant, that sounds very exciting. And how did you get into herbalism in the first place?
Yeah, I got into herbalism because I'm a health coach now, but I'm also an herbalist. So it really does help because my niche and what I help people do is bring herbs into the daily life. Specifically people who have mystery illnesses or are kind of going through a chapter where there's not really a lot of clarity with what's going on. They just know something is off. And we now know, right? Now you know too, Ms. Green, that herbs are different. They're not drugs. They're not RXs. They're these other things, right? They work in multiple pathways. Excuse me, I have my kitty cat. He sometimes, you're lucky, he sometimes shows up on Zoom calls, especially when we talk about plants. I don't know, maybe he's an herbalist. He likes the violets. It's springtime here, so we go for walks together. And so mystery meaning, again, things that like are going on. It could be an outright just hitting a wall in health, going through many tests and still not finding clarity. And that increases the stress and increases the anxiety. And so herbs specifically are going to give balance to the body, and drugs just don't do that. So I had to discover that on my own through my own mystery illness and through my body's reaction to things, including conventional foods, conventional routines, the American Western diet. And it was a big turning point for me to really kind of realize that plants create that kind of space and opportunity to connect directly to nature. And the simplicity is what gives us motivation to continue down the path. So it's not just like, I'm kind of flipping it all on the head. Instead of people going to someone and saying, give me something for this symptom, because that's kind of a Western idea, right? Instead, I'm helping them connect to nature directly so that they can acquire the skills and practice it themselves, so that they have that heart, that self-determination, self-advocacy. Because being as someone with a mystery illness, it's a long-term thing. It's not this like short-term acute struggle, like a headache. It's like a more of a chronic condition. So I work specifically with people like that because I myself had that and changed a lot of the symptoms, which is good. Change is good. It means we're going in the right direction. Yeah. When allergy's gone and realizing that the terrain of your intestinal lining is better, feeling like some of the symptoms that you had previously are gone because of the use of herbal teas and tinctures. I mean, who wouldn't sign up for that? It's pretty amazing. And I hear so many success stories and people's surgeries being, rescheduled or completely taken off the books altogether just by using herbs and or natural strategies in this larger protocol. And then also plants energetically work and spiritually work too. So I find that to be absolutely the truth. And I always include that with my content for people because I've had personal spiritual journeys with plants that, tell me that not only are they intelligent, but they're supposed to be communicated with and listened to and respected. And when we build that respect intentionally through activities, we actually heal ourselves. Like we kind of fit the chasms that maybe why we're hitting those ruts in our healing to begin with, because we're disconnecting from nature.
That is so true, because we live such an artificial lifestyle. That's amazing. Excellent story. Thank you so much. You elaborated so nicely. And so I was just curious, what were your experiences with the plants spiritually?
I've had a couple specific things that have happened. I moved to my area in the southern region of the United States from a more northern metropolis, New York City. And I wasn't in tune with nature at all. I enjoyed it from this very kind of like artificial place. And the more I go into plants now, I now have like openings in my memories of my grandmother's garden as a kid, or the cherry tree, or the snails that went up the cherry tree. I mean, all these relationships that now make sense. But when I moved down to this area, I was still in this mindset of kind of like, I didn't really have a relationship to myself, to my body. So all this health stuff happened simultaneously with me also connecting to some community gardens. And there was one plant in particular that kind of like took me out of my headspace that I was in, and it put me into a bit of kind of a in the moment, present moment that I hadn't experienced before. And I now know that was a plant communicating to me. It was taking me out of myself and putting me in this other space. So plants work on our consciousness in that way. And I believe that plants communicate with us through images that we get into our heads if we are mindful and actually intentional spending time in wild spaces. So I include that, and it's an area that I'd like to explore more professionally, maybe nature-based programming, nature-based therapy, specifically for people who went through traumas and childhood ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, because tapping into that primal childhood, again, it's part of that, like keeping that resilience and that turn to flow, which actually increases parasympathetic nervous system response. So we know that nature is healing. We've proven it. So we don't need any more conventional science really backing us up, right? We know this is true, but it is nice to get some like actual data on how and why. But in this raw form, it's absolutely transformative. I've seen it every single summer for the last 10 years with children and youth and teenagers in the forest, and where we have children and youth who go off of their prescription meds every summer. And by the end of the summer, they have more focus and more ability to concentrate than they did when the summer began. And that's because they're outside 9 hours a day, really feeling that daylight, feeling the energy shift, and being around so many trees. It's absolutely part of that. So both from, to answer your question, more just from absolute intuitive observation of others. So that's to build the data in my practice, but then also personal, absolute, like it always has to do with the ability of nature to take me out of my current headspace and put me into a more meditative state if I choose to pay attention to it. And that's that development of curiosity and wonder, which really are wonderful strategies to bring us into that healing state.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I was just wondering, when you were talking about creating relationships with the plants, do you think we can also establish these relationships with dried herbs? Let's say we buy organic herbs from a store, or does it specifically work better with the plants that are actually growing on the land? They are still alive. How would you explain that?
That's a really great question, because there are differentiations in herbalism practices. We have the vitalists, and those are the folks who believe that it has to be the presence of the energy of the plant. So the more time between the harvest and the processing, the less vital it is. And it is something that we have to accommodate because some people are more familiar or more comfortable with dried preparations because they're more used to this kind of dried westernized approach. You know, they're not used to someone just telling them to go out and pick a dandelion leaf and eat it, you know. But part of that rewilding is getting them to kind of get outside of their comfort zone. So it's okay to start in that other place and to move forward. But if we want to get the full energetic thing, I do firmly believe that vitalism is a pretty important, imperative part of the journey. It could just be walking outside barefoot. Any moment to challenge people to be a little bit more childlike and in a state of wonder and curiosity, which my programming definitely focuses on. Again, because we're tapping into a stronger well of healing rather than just applying things to symptoms, which we know does not work because we kind of get into a rut, and it's a different approach, and it's more about peace and joy and emotions and feeling those things, allowing ourselves to feel those things safely.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. So, today we are going to discuss herbs that are most popular in your practice, such as herbs for immunity support, hormonal balance, and energy support. So, can we start with the immunity herbs, please?
Yeah, those are the three areas that I do get asked about a lot. And great, interesting enough, they're all kind of integrated into one. One thing can feed the other because, again, we're not like these separate parts, right? We are a whole being. So fundamentally, how I would start working with anyone, depending on it, is figuring out, what is the severity of their situation. And we can figure that out by asking how long the duration of that condition's been going on, how it's affecting other things in life, what things are the person's not doing that they want to be doing. It really gives us an indicator as to maybe how long or how deeply effective this problem is. So when it comes to just general getting not really complicated situations regarding immunity, hormones, sleep, and energy, we have to look at the pillar practices and where things have not been maybe going as good. So the principal things that everybody should do, which is diet, exercise, better sleep, better sense of well-being, which is kind of what people have been experiencing this past year. It's just a sense of like kind of a blah, like things aren't really kind of moving forward because it's been kind of up in the air and not really clear path. We really had a big mental shift happen where how we determined productivity really had to change, and that really has an effect over us. So what the mind feels, the body feels. So the first system I would even help support in all of those places is the nervous system. By supporting the nervous system, we're supporting the entire body because the nervous system either controls most of everything going on or it communicates. And then usually digestion is also looked at as well. By kind of affecting those two places, we actually can affect all of those areas that we talked about. So because immunity generally lives in the digestive system, and by affecting the nervous system and supporting the nervous system, we are supporting, again, all the systems of the body. So going into immunity, it's like we want to provide the nutrition for the nervous system. We also want to provide, depending on the situation, either a modulating effect or an effect where or a balancing effect, or we're actually creating a stimulating behavior in the body so that it can either like go after something a little bit better that's happening. So we generally, as herbalists, classify immunity under like an acute situation. So like, oh, I have a little bit of a cold. It feels like I have a little bit of congestion going on, versus like a more prolonged, deeper state. So we have to determine which one that is and apply the herbs appropriately. generally, I love the use of indications, so specific indications, specific cures. So that goes back to some older systems of herbal preparations from the early 1900s, and also homeopathy, which is also basically the same system and the philosophy behind vaccines, where you introduce a really small amount of something for the body to recognize. And it's what we do with immunology as well, with immunotherapies for allergy sufferers. So helping the body build better resistance by exposing it to what it's actually allergic or sensitive to. So some of the more balancing herbs can include, I know people don't generally put Echinacea under there, but it is a bit of a kind of a contradiction, which it can be with herbs, right? Because herbs can be multiple things, which is not drugs. Drugs work one direction only. Herbs are not that way. One way Echinacea is immunostimulating, can produce phagocytosis, alkaloids. They create this body's own cellular cleanup crew. It's really cute. They're like little Pac-Man, and they go in and remove the cellular death waste from the body, including after like an injury. So that's why we would give Echinacea after like a snake bite or after a situation where there was a break or an injury. But Echinacea is also a modulator. It's been shown to have a mast cell reduction or an influence over mast cells. So we know that it's actually kind of good when the body's too excited too. So it's really cool because herbs are innately intelligent, which is kind of this really radical thing. And in a way, we kind of have evolved alongside these herbs. So they've kind of like evolved to be for our problems. So modern issues, modern plants, but also these plants have been around for a long time, and they're going to be the future for a lot of our modern issues. So that's really why we need to protect them on an environmental level as well. So yeah, immune system. Balancing. And another balancing herb I love is reishi mushroom, because herbs are not just plants. They're all plants that or mushrooms, things that we consume for a healing purpose or healing intention. That's how I define herb. So mushrooms are definitely there, and reishi has the ability. One of the indications I saw in quotations once, I think it really does fit well for reishi, is it's good for a scattered immune system. And I like that word a lot, especially for my clients, because scattered, kind of to me, it's like an immune system that's reading things wrong or not appropriately responding, or it's over responding. So reishi has a balancing effect, and it also happens to be an adaptogen. So it kind of works in both that immunomodulatory and adaptogen level as a balancer of the body and toning the body. So yeah.
I was thinking about Echinacea. I've been hearing about this herb a lot recently. So I was wondering if you can tell us how can we use it and when? Like, for example, how can people make simple home remedies using Echinacea when they have cold or any other conditions where their immune system is temporarily compromised, for example?
Echinacea in tincture form is the way that I would go, and or lozenges. And I don't have the exact dosage guidelines, but I want to say it would be like 10 mil, maybe 1 to 3 times a day for a duration of like a week or two. And you want to use the fresh cut or dried, cut and sifted herbal tincture. So it gets going to be a lot of I think inulin. I'm not sure if the plant possesses inulin actually, but it has some complex carbohydrate that could be the polysaccharides actually. So it might be a preparation that's also suitable for a water and alcohol soluble tincture. So look up the plant's premier solvency. What is it best soluble in? And I have had Echinacea lozenges. The thing about Echinacea too, fresh Echinacea, is that when you taste it, it should have like a bit of like a vibrational kind of a taste to it. And those are the alkaloids. So tasting a raw root, and if you get a really strong alkaloid presence, then you've got a really good source for your tincturing. And other plants have that too. So because Echinacea, you might start it from seed and you wait maybe 3 to 4 years to do a really good root harvest. So other plants have that action in like their leaves, and they'll give you those leaves after like a summer of growing. So it's good to get to know that whole category of immunostimulants. They're really cool, really interesting plants, and buzzworthy. I mean, they're really fabulous, buzzing sensation in the mouth. So a great teaching plant to help people kind of experience action of plants immediately upon tasting. So fresh and flowers, roots, and leaves of Echinacea, all for the similar purposes, but I do prefer the root if I was really coming down with something or feeling a little bit of underweather.
That's a very great tip. Thank you so much. I will be trying that next winter, probably when the immunity goes down.
Yeah, winter sow them, the Echinacea. Echinacea purpurea is the easiest to grow, and you can just throw them in a container out in the snow and let the nature do its thing. It'll break down the seed and bring up some really strong plants for you.
Can you grow it in a pot by any chance, do you know?
Yeah, you can grow all the types in a pot. Give it like 10 inches to a foot of space and separate the plants by like a foot.
Okay, thank you so much for beautiful tips. Can't wait to try them all. And can you tell us about plants that are beneficial and can balance our hormonal system?